Welcome to the CERAWeek podcast, where the world's energy leaders and innovators share insights on the future of energy, technology, and climate. I am Atul Arya, Chief Energy Strategist at S&P Global. In each episode, we dive into the critical issues and bold ideas shaping our energy future. So let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome again to CERAWeek podcast. Today, we are going around the world to Saudi Arabia to hear from one of the leaders from Saudi Aramco, the largest oil company in the world, but also doing many other interesting things. So this episode will be quite unique and I am sure very interesting. So with that, I am very pleased to welcome you, Ashraf Ghazzawi, Executive Vice President for Strategy and Corporate Development at Aramco. Ashraf, welcome to CERAWeek podcast.
Thank you, Atul. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be with you on the podcast and looking forward to seeing you on CERAWeek.
Yes, absolutely. So let's start, Ashraf, at a high level, and then we'll get into more specifics about Saudi Aramco. There's so much discussion this year about trade, technology, security, all these considerations impacting the energy sector. So what's your view on this?
Before I talk about the particular concerns around the current circumstances, perhaps if we step back a bit and look into the historical context, I guess such events, whether it's security, trade, or technology, has always been a permanent fixture in the energy industry. The industry had always had to navigate a shock to the system of some sort. So really, we're not really dealing with anything new, from the Russia-Ukraine conflict to the COVID-19 pandemic, even the great financial crisis. The industry always had to manage an event of some sort. What is impressive, however, is that the industry was always able to respond to such shocks in the system and find a way to continue largely unchanged and to deliver on the mandate. Moving to current specific concerns, to your reference in today's landscape, to me, trade and security elements are really intertwined. The common thread, in my view, is that the desire for greater energy security and economic security underpins the need to not be over-dependent on a particular supplier, whether it's supply chain, commodity services, or even energy source. Depending on a single entity to supply conventional energy and replacing it to dependence on a single supplier for new energy or rare minerals, you have not really done much. You still have this single party exposure of some sort. From a technology point of view, I'd probably highlight two things. One, the question to me is how much AI is impacting energy demand and energy systems. It is clear that with the increase or forecasted increase in AI demand, the competitiveness of energy costs is going to be a key variable to watch for. I think another issue in my mind is how renewables and new energies would be integrated into the current energy system without any disruptions. We always have to aspire to find what is that sweet spot for the integration of the various solutions. And we need to solve for the reliability as well as the affordability of such integration. We, of course, have to do all of that, keeping in mind that lowering emissions from the energy sector have to be a common objective across all. For us, I think if you look at the Aramco experience, we've been in business for over 90 years. We have been able to witness many of these disruptive events and various forces that is acting on the energy industry, but somehow found a way to continue to deliver. I'd attribute that to our ability to always plan for the long term and plan for across cycles.
I think that's a great setting the scene here, Ashraf. I think one thing I just want to emphasize what you said is that even in the biggest crisis like the COVID-19, there was free flow and secure flow of energy. And that was became so critical, if you remember, because we were all sitting at homes using internet and video, and that needed energy. People should not forget that the energy industry came around and supplied around the world, including yourselves in Saudi Aramco. Let me then move to some specifics from the high level. So how do you see energy demand and supply for the rest of this decade?
I think from our view, we see demand will continue to grow to meet the growing global population and the growing global economy. 2025 saw global energy demand growing by about 5 million barrels of oil equivalent. That's largely aligned with historical trends. if you look back to even 4 decades in the past, on
Yeah.
average, global energy demand grew at about 4.5 million barrels of oil equivalent. So we're largely in line with historical trends. That being said, let me share with you some numbers to put the energy demand, at least, in context. Today, 75% of the world's population reside in energy short or energy deprived countries. Some call them developing economies or the global south. If you want to compare the energy consumption per capita with developed economies, look at the places like the US or Europe. The energy consumption per capita in North America is about 43 barrels of oil equivalent per capita per year. In Europe, it's anywhere between 22 and 23. You contrast that with places like India, where it's 6 barrels of energy oil equivalent per capita and 4 in Africa. Those developing nations and developing economies have quite a way to go to basically raise the per capita energy consumption and to develop their economies. So, any energy outlook really that projects a decline in energy demand or implies less access to energy for the vast majority of the global population is, in my view, not desirable or even credible. So, energy demand will continue to grow to drive the economic development around the world. That said, I think the demand side of the supply demand of energy equation is not really the key variable here. I think supply is something is worth looking at.
Yeah.
Oil and gas business is a depletion business. If you look at the annual average decline rate from conventional oil and gas fields, it's about 8 to 10% globally for fields. If you look at the unconventional business decline rate, that's orders of magnitude compared to the conventional fields. I
Yeah.
mean, that means 90% of the annual upstream oil and gas investments is dedicated to offsetting such production declines. So to us, the average decline rates are becoming steeper over time. That requires a lot more investment to just stand still. To put it simply, really, that the industry needs to continue to invest to overcome rising depletion rates, as well as to continue to produce to meet the growing demand around the world.
It's interesting you say the demand has been growing for as far back as we can see, pretty steady clip with some declines like COVID. Let's come to Aramco now. So tell us about how do you navigate sort of complex strategic planning? You're a large company and it's highly unpredictable global environment. How do you do this?
A tool in Aramco, we constantly take a long term view with our investment horizon and our planning exercises. Every year, when we engage with our board on strategic planning and investment planning, we tend to take a very long term view. We examine what are those macro forces that are acting on the industry and acting on the company. What are those key trends that we have to watch out for? So, adopting a long term view has been our modus operandi for decades. And
Mhm.
honestly, you have to look at our history for you to appreciate how our long term planning paid off. If you look at our oil business, we've never stopped investing in oil since our early oil production in the 1930s. Our
Yeah.
first major gas investment in the 1970s was the construction of the master gas system, a massive network that spans the kingdom that helped collect gases that were otherwise being flared to collect the gas and provide it to the kingdom. And this gas network today supplies gas that is used to generate power, desalinate water, and supports many industries around the kingdom. In the 1980s, all the way to the current days, we have developed a domestic and international refining network, domestically and globally, to serve as dedicated outlets for our crude production. We then followed that with a series of chemicals business investments to integrate further into the value chain. There's also one very impressive, in our view, long term
Mhm.
call that we've done, which is the establishment of what we call ICTIVA, or the In Kingdom Total Value Add Program. This was a program that was aimed to localize a lot of our spend in the energy supply chain and services. When we launched the program back in 2015, only 35% of our spend was localized. Our intent was to bring in a lot of international partners to localize their goods and services,
Mhm.
manufacturing
Mhm.
in Kingdom. And that program proved to be a winning strategy around major disruptive times around COVID. We're able to keep energy supplies flowing without any interruption during a time where many of our peers and competitors out there really struggled to obtain access to equipment and critical services. These are just
Yeah.
examples of how Aramco have always planned in the long term and saw actually value of long-term planning.
I think this is a really important point. I just want to, for our audience, to emphasize energy business, the business, the oil and gas business, are long horizon business. So even if you plan something today, and you mentioned the gas system and all the other things you have done, they take years to put in the ground. If you say today you make a decision, so let's proceed, it's not like tomorrow. It's not software, right? It's hardware business. And sometimes our people outside the industry don't really understand. And some of that is happening today as well, isn't it? So let's talk about your kind of current strategic priorities. What's your focus today?
Our strategy is really driven by a few beliefs. And let me share
Mhm.
those beliefs with you before I describe our long term strategy. First, we believe that reliable and affordable energy supplies, including conventional energy like oil and gas, will continue to be a primary driver for global energy demand. We also believe that chemicals demand growth will continue to be a primary driver for oil demand, particularly in Asia. With regards to lower carbon energy supplies, we believe that lower carbon solutions will be additive, meaning they
Mhm.
will become an add on to the conventional energy layer. It will be complementary, not necessarily a replacement, and will be needed along with conventional energy to fuel global energy demand. And last but not least, we strongly believe in the role of technology and AI, that it will become an enabler for efficiency and productivity that the industry will benefit from. So, that said, our strategy can really be described as follows. We'll continue to grow conventional energy in oil and gas. We will continue to invest growing our oil business and protect our preeminent position in oil and continue to
Mhm.
sustain our maximum sustainable capacity at 12 million barrels. We will continue to invest to grow our gas business. Gas is a very important growth area for Aramco. We'll continue to grow that business in the coming years. And in downstream, we will continue to further integrate into our upstream business to provide placement opportunities for our crude oil. We will continue to look at lower capex or capital light opportunities to chemicals capacity in the Asian market. And we will continue to invest in new growth areas like lower carbon energy solutions, as well as digital and AI technologies.
So let's dig deeper into all of this. But one thing I again want to emphasize that your priorities go across the value chain, right? From oil and gas production and downstream, and then also into the petrochemicals. So very integrated portfolio. And just to reemphasize one other thing you just mentioned, Ashraf, 12 million barrels is your capacity, correct? That's what their
Right.
target
That's
capacity.
our maximum
Yeah.
sustainable capacity. Correct.
Can we talk a little bit about gas? Because gas has been an important part of the portfolio. Our audience may not know this. And you've just started a very big gas project, isn't it? So tell us about that.
Gas is an exciting growth area for us in our strategy. But let me start first by saying we are the only gas supplier in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Our
Hmm.
primary objective and our license to operate is to meet the projected demand growth for gas in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. What is not known to many is that Saudi Arabia is already among the world's largest gas markets. We're the sixth globally. To put it in context, Saudi Arabia's gas demand today is greater than that of major economies like Japan and Germany. And what we intend going forward is to continue to invest in the growth of our gas business to reach by 2030 almost 6 million barrels of oil equivalent. If you think about it,
Hmm.
that's half of our oil MSC by 2030. What we're
Yes.
bringing between the 2021 production levels all the way to 2030 is an IOC equivalent of barrels of oil equivalent. That's just the growth in the gas business. How are we going to achieve this growth? Well, we're doing major investments. One of them is the gas project that you've mentioned in Jafura. This is the first unconventional gas project that we construct and develop in the kingdom. That is forecasted to go up to 2 billion scuffs of sales gas by 2030. We have a very large gas plant, Tanajib gas plant. It's going to bring in 2.6 billion scuffs per day of capacity. And we're also expanding Fadli gas plant to bring an additional 1.5 billion scuffs per day as well. Major investments in gas portfolio in the kingdom. We also
Yes.
have a large trader of gas, LNG, through the Aramco trading. And we will be making a lot of investments globally and scaling into LNG through strategic equity stakes to increase our exposure into international LNG as well.
The gas production growth domestically, you just talked about going to 2030. Will most of that gas be used domestically into sort of power generation and heating, desalination, and so on?
Yes, the main focus is to meet the growing demand in the kingdom. Correct.
So that's very interesting. Now, what about you mentioned in your priorities lower carbon? So, what are your priorities in the lower carbon business? And you did set up a lower carbon business a few years back, right?
Correct, we did. So our priorities in terms of the lower carbon business are primarily two. One, produce solutions that lower our emissions. And second, develop a portfolio of lower carbon technologies that we can offer to our customers. In terms of reduction
Uh-huh.
of our emissions, we will continue to pursue investments in efficiencies, flaring reduction, methane reduction to lower emissions from our operations. We have a target to reduce our upstream carbon intensity by 15% by the year 2035. And I have to note, we're already among the lowest, if
Yes.
not the lowest, upstream carbon intensity, but we already have a target to lower that even further by 15% in 2035. In terms of growing our portfolio of lower carbon solutions, we're an investor in renewables energy in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We are
Mhm.
partnering with Aqua as well as PIF in the development of renewables energy in the kingdom. We anticipate that by 2030, Aramco will own roughly about 20% of the renewables capacity in Saudi. That's roughly between 15 and 20 gigawatts, if you want to appreciate the scale of it. We're also
Yes.
looking at constructing a CCS hub, a carbon capture and storage hub in the east coast of the kingdom, and putting plans to go up to 9 million tons per annum of CCS capacity, part of that project. We've also looked at blue hydrogen and blue ammonia. We've put in plans in place. We've identified projects and identified plans that will allow us to move should the market pick up. As a matter of fact, we've participated in recent auctions in Asian markets, won these
Hmm.
auctions and proved to be very competitive in terms of
Uh-huh.
pricing. We were able actually to compete with US and global suppliers, and we won that auction. Unfortunately, the early enthusiasm around these auctions didn't really materialize, and offtake agreements have not really materialized as governments were not able to decide which way they want to go with the blue ammonia auctions. But that gave us a very
Yeah.
important data point that Aramco can be competitive. Should the market in blue hydrogen pick up, Aramco is ready with plans and is able to compete.
Yeah. So you have a rather interesting portfolio in the low carbon. And I remember, I think it was 3 years back at the COP in Sharm el Sheikh, which is where you announced the CCS project. I think you have SLB and Lindy as your partners
Correct.
in
They are
that.
our,
That project is progressing well,
yes,
Ashraf?
yes.
Now, of course, we have to talk about AI, right? AI is the talk of the day. Every day we see something new happening. I get the feeling that, like other things, Aramco has been doing a lot around AI, maybe not talking about it. So tell us about what you're doing. How is it impacting your planning, your operations?
You're absolutely right. I believe rather than just giving you high level views on AI, I'll tell you specifically how we've approached it. Amin Nasser, our CEO, a few years back, made it a point that Aramco is going to focus and double down on deploying AI in our core business because he believed
Mhm.
at that time when he set the company strategy for AI is that this is where the maximum impact is. We wanted to focus on deploying AI in our core business, core operations to reap the maximum benefits. And we believe that Aramco had the ingredients back then to lead and succeed in AI. Because in our view, you really need to have three main building blocks to succeed in AI and become a recognized major player. You have to have the data, you have to have the
Yeah.
infrastructure, and you have to have the human capital or talent. In terms of data, Aramco has over 90 years of operating data between operations, subsurface data, engineering reports, capital projects, and construction data, not to mention the 10 billion data points that flows on daily basis from all our operations in upstream and
Mhm.
downstream. Vast amounts of data that we can reap benefits from. On the infrastructure side, we have an infrastructure that we built over 5 or 6 decades that comprises of supercomputers, high performance computing, real time data acquisition systems that gets us a very powerful platform to build AI models on top of that. And in terms of talent, Our strategy when it comes to AI is to train AI and data scientists, but to couple them and complement them with subject matter expertise, because data scientists and AI professionals alone cannot really produce a lot of impact and value in your core operations. So we had to couple them with the subject matter expertise. And to that, we had real examples that we deployed that suggested that our strategy was right. In subsurface, for example, AI was able to reduce the seismic interpretation from months to minutes. That helps us with exploration data interpretation. We use AI to generate real time logs that helps us in our drilling operations, guided by satellites and AI models, to help us
Hmm.
arrive at the most productive spot in the reservoir. That will maximize recovery and production. It will minimize emissions and energy intensity that goes into our drilling operations. In surface operations, we've used AI to help us reduce methane intensity by almost 11% year on year recently. And also, it helped us predict failures in critical equipment before they have occurred just by looking at operating parameters. And that had helped us reduce unplanned maintenance by almost 20% as a result of a recent report that we've published. So, how do we measure all of this? Amin didn't just want to basically launch the strategy, he wanted to have a measure that allows us to capture the impact. So we've launched a metric called Technology Realized Value, or TRV for short. This metric
Ah,
audited and vetted by independent third party. And last, we were able to generate $4 billion of technology realized value. Half of that, or 2 billion, can be attributed to AI deployment.
that's fantastic. And I really like the way you are thinking, sort of the three-legged stool you mentioned, Ashraf. And I'm also, as a petroleum engineer, I have to say, I'm very pleased that we are not going away yet. You still need the subject matter expertise into the future. So there is future for us.
Exactly. Nothing talks about our core business more than petroleum engineering and implementation in that field as well.
Thank you. So let's just wrap up a couple of additional questions. You mentioned Iktiwa, the in-kingdom value add, which was very far-sighted because that helped you, as you said, in the COVID period by having supply chains in the kingdom. What do you think is equivalent you are thinking about today? And well, so people will say 15 years, 20 years from now that Aramco got this one right as well.
As you mentioned, I hope in 15 years people will recognize that Aramco made all the right calls and that the results and value we've created would, in a way, vindicate these strategies and investments. Our continued investment and focus on low emissions, low cost, low intensity crude, I think that would signal how Aramco was successful in a strategy to continue to invest in oil production, leveraging our low carbon and low intensity solutions. Today, perhaps there's not much market or recognition for lower carbon crude, but I think in time there will be a
Yeah.
market and Aramco could be differentiated in that regard. With regards to gas, I think Aramco, with all the significant investments we're making, think in the future we look at gas to generate a lot of value for the company, position us as one of the key forefront players in the gas market and gas business. I'd also expect that Aramco's investment approach in lower carbon solutions would be fully vindicated in the sense that we have always followed a very careful and deliberate approach to the investments in lower carbon. Build it and they will come was never our philosophy. We said we will
Yes.
never sanction any of these lower carbon investments without a guaranteed offtake. So in the future, I hope people will recognize that Aramco was right to be very disciplined in the capital it allocated to our lower carbon business. And finally, back to your AI question, in the future, people would look at Aramco and see that it made a winning strategy focusing on implementing it in our core business and core operations. I would highlight one investments that we are in the process of making. We made an announcement late last year that we intend to acquire a significant minority in Humane. It's a national champion AI cloud
Mhm.
infrastructure that was launched by the kingdom and owned by PIF. We are in the process of acquiring that significant minority. And we look at Humane as a key investment that will provide a significant value to Aramco and to the kingdom, and to propel the application of AI in the industry to help create significant value for Aramco and others. And people would look back and say, Aramco was right to focus on AI deployment in its core business and facilitate investments to maximize the use of industrial AI.
These are all fantastic initiatives, Ashraf, and we look forward to hearing much more about all of this. I would just say, from a personal perspective, I think what you're doing on gas is just amazing and not very well known, I think, outside the kingdom. And that'll be something, hopefully, you and your colleagues in your Aramco house talk about. Besides everything else, I don't want to minimize anything else, but gas is such an important part of the future. I think that's going to be very interesting to hear more about that from you. The last question I have is, you're coming to CERAWeek. We're looking forward to that. What will be your priorities when you are in Houston?
I think CERAWeek is that one event no oil executive can afford to miss. It's that one event that brings all the industry leaders to hear what the current state of the industry is, to hear from global thought leaders and industry leaders. I am, of course, looking forward to meeting you and being on the panel with you. Most importantly, to listen, because we all enjoy listening to the thought leaders and the insights from the industry leaders at CERAWeek. Look at where our peers are heading, what's their thought process, where do they think the next big opportunities are. Significant opportunity for all of us to really listen and learn during CERAWeek. From our part, I think we as Aramco would like to be sharing with our colleagues a few key messages. Oil and gas is definitely here to stay. That's been our view and belief for a long time. And if anything, everybody now has submitted to the fact that, yeah, this is the case and will continue to be the case for many years to come. And that technology continues to provide great solutions for companies like Aramco to create and unlock significant value.
So, Ashraf, you have a full agenda. We look forward to seeing you and your colleagues, including Amin Nasser, your CEO, to CERAWeek. Thank you for doing this podcast. A lot of interesting things you're doing and the facts and the figures you quoted. So thanks again for joining us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul, and thank you for having me on this podcast.
Thank you for joining us on the CERAWeek podcast. To stay connected with the ideas driving change across energy and technology, subscribe, share, and rate this episode. It helps us get the word out. Let's continue having impactful conversations. I'm Atul Arya. Until the next time.
The CERAWeek podcast with Atul Arya is brought to you by CERAWeek, the world's premier energy conference. Be part of the conversations moving the world of energy forward. March 23rd through 27th, 2026 in Houston. Discover more at CERAWeek.com.